you're comfortable with the actual presentation at town meeting?
What do you mean?
You're gonna present. You want to talk. You want the mic.
Yeah, I'm happy to volunteer to do it. Yeah, I started putting together some slides without getting into the details. My week kind of got derailed, and I just got back from an unexpected trip to Long Island, so it is not done. But yeah, I started the slides, which I will hopefully have up in a second, and I'd be happy to volunteer to do the presentation.
Okay, if everybody's comfortable enough, I will entertain a motion to allow Eric to do the presentation, unless somebody wants to throw their name in the hat, in the ring, whatever.
I'm perfectly comfortable with Eric presenting.
Is that your motion?
It is my motion.
Can I hear a second?
Second, yeah.
Any discussion? We're gonna have to do this by roll call. All right, hearing none. Mr. Prisby?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Eric? Brittany?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Bruce is an aye. Eric, just give me a quick nod.
Yep, aye.
Okay.
I'll have it in 1 sec.
So remember, the goal of this is we just want to make sure we put the general ideas in place of what we want to present and get across. We need to have these submitted to Blake tomorrow morning to fit in the kind of the preparation for a town meeting. And then I will email the town moderator to let her know that we did decide that Eric was going to do the presentation. So when we actually go there on game day, so to speak, want to be a little bit early and just go introduce, and then we'll make sure when they do their dry run, so to speak, we'll see that, make sure that the slides are in the right spot. We'll want to keep it to that 5 to 10 minute range, but most presentations during my experience at town meeting have time restrictions on them that never gets up here too. It's very difficult when you get into that situation. Just real quick, can everybody hear me proper? I feel real raspy. Rich, you need to move one row further closer, then you'll be all set.
You go high, then
all right, fine.
Then you go high, then you go low.
All right. I'm really glad you came down, because I was just up here all by myself.
Yeah, I'm glad I rushed down.
Yeah. Thanks, buddy.
Hey, Bruce was looking very lonely up there.
Yeah,
I bet.
it's a quiet place up here. Okay, no name tag.
The upside is 25 Worcester Street's going to be done by the time I get to this part, so no worries.
Fair enough. I am still waiting on some questionnaires from individuals.
Yep, me. Sorry, I forgot.
All right, I have it. It's probably just easiest, Chris, if you can just let me share my screen.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Okay.
Eric, I'm going to give you the mic too. Just walk us through it. It's fine. Just the basic points that we're going to touch on. Make sure we're all comfortable with them. Make sure nothing needs to get added. We'll vote on it. And then, whatever graphics you want to put up there, we're going to just end up leaving to the discretion of, the people who are going to put the presentation together and actually give it.
Yep. All right. Share.
She's not here.
Okay. Can you guys see this?
Yeah.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, so this is not a final copy. I like I said, I meant to finish this beforehand, but I had to make a trip. And obviously my talk track at this point is probably garbage, so I'll have to work on that too. But 5 minutes is not a lot of time, so I tried to distill this down just into a couple slides. I don't even know if we need to put this on, but I figured it would maybe help to put the layman's one sentence of what this is doing. Obviously, the warrant article itself is a whole, we're changing this language. It's a bunch of reading for people. But if you just showed up and you're like, what is this? That's what I'm hoping to answer here. So it, allows the trust to appoint a member of CPC and replaces one of the at-large member spots currently appointed by the select board.
So, Eric, if you're going to put that, I would just mention one of the 4 at-large member spots.
Yep, good point. Okay. Next up is why, just a quick background. I'm not going to read everything. That's what the words on the slide are for. But hey, this is what we're doing. We're creating affordable housing in town. This is from our mission statement on the website. Please check it out. And then, what is the relevance of CPC? So explaining, what they do. Please check this sentence. I don't want to misspeak on CPC, but they recommend projects at town meeting that can be funded with CPA dollars. Projects are restricted to those involving open space, outdoor rec, historic, and affordable housing. And then CPA dollars are the main source of the trust's cash reserves. And the trust can use its reserves to subsidize new or existing market rate housing units and turn them into affordable designated units via the deed. I don't know if the deed is needed. I mean, that's typically how it's done, but you say nothing, I'm leaving it in.
The only, Eric, go back one just real quick.
Yep.
So cash reserves, CPA.
I didn't really know what to say there.
Yeah, if I make it up with a better word for, revolving. We do have sizable, a sizable settlement that came to us, and there was a fair amount of interest accrued on that settlement. So, but as far as money used for operational things like rental assistance or mortgage assistance or first-time housing allowances or local preference type initiatives, those are going to have to come out of revolving accounts.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about something like CPA dollars are the trust's only annual funding source?
As long, and I guess that works. Yeah.
Yeah, only regular annual funding source. I mean, we could at any time be the beneficiary of someone's kind deed to give us a lot of money, but this is our only regular funding source.
Yeah, we can all. I mean, we can be gifted land. We can take contributions from a myriad of other sources that typically hasn't really happened. Conveyance of property and stuff like that has happened, but I don't think it can be relied on. Most people go through the right of first refusal process, and they can't send chapter land directly to us. So.
Yeah. Okay. All good. Any other feedback on this one?
Please just chime in. We're going to keep this a little bit open. Okay. Go ahead, Eric.
Okay. All right. So just, again, I think the context is important here. Like, why are we asking for this? So, I'll try to buzz through some of these slides as quickly as I can. But the main question is, maybe people are saying, why doesn't the trust have a member on CPC? And then why in general? So that's what these 2 slides are talking about. So, just going over the facts, CPA was passed and created the CPC in Grafton in 2002. This is, I think, incorrect, actually. This is 2005. And then I'll just mention that Grafton's was created in 2007. That is correct, right?
Yes.
I would say affordable housing trusts were not created by the state until 2005, just to make it clear that we're talking about like the option of having an affordable housing trust didn't even exist until 2005. If you don't mention that, it kind of might be interpreted as Grafton's affordable housing trust was not created until 2005.
Yep, makes sense.
Okay. Should I just say Grafton's Affordable Housing Trust was created in 2007? That'll be the line here. And then I can mention that the ability to create an affordable housing trust was codified into law 2 years prior to that.
That sounds good.
I wouldn't, because the sort of the point here is, you know, we've got our representative on the CPA, if I can use that word in quotes, is the housing authority, because the housing authority was seen, I think, on a state level as sort of being adjacent to our mission, and it was the only thing that was analogous at the time. But now, after the CPA was created by statute, they never amended it to reflect that an affordable housing trust member could preferably take that role. And the affordable housing trusts weren't created by the state by law until 2005. So that's like a subtly important point, or not even subtle, very important point that I think we want to drive home here.
Yep. You know, I don't want to focus on the past on this presentation, but you know, it's just a fact. There's not been a whole lot of opportunities for affordable housing trust involvement in the past. The trust has not had land in the past. The trust did not come across most of its money until 2015. You know, I guess I don't need to go into those things, but you know, it's facts of the case. Like, it didn't have a lot of opportunities in the past. And now there are more opportunities. We have a piece of land, development interest in Grafton, independent of what we do, has risen dramatically. And I say more on that later here, but I think it'd probably be good to just verbally mention a couple projects here of, like, we're working on GSX on Upton Street, and additionally, maybe we don't have to talk about other proposed developments that we're not involved in yet, but I could just mention, you know, there are a pipeline of developments in the works for, you know, multi-unit where the trust could get involved or something like that.
I think that the overwhelming change from my perspective and opportunity is the sheer amount of revolving inventory that the trust is going to have exposure to now. So make sure we're going to have 500 more units on of already permitted or in the process of permitting. And of those, 25% will be affordable. So you'll have well over 100 units that, we're going to have the ability to exercise some local preference, to exercise some of the lowering the AMI, to introduce, people actually just starting out. I know that's a lot of verbiage and stuff like that, but that's why it's important. Those programs, will all be part of revolving programs.
What do you mean by revolving programs, Bruce?
I mean, like, they're programs that you'll have to sustain over years. They won't be one-time things. You'll have inventory coming in, these 500 and perhaps the other projects that will be coming in over the years past. But if you look at Upton, that's going to be staged over 3 years, and it'll probably take them 2.5 years to get full occupancy, maybe less. But it depends on how they phase everything in, if they need to be all built at once or what have you. But if we're doing like a local preference thing, we're going to want money set there over the course of a few years to make sure we provide, let's say we want to do 50% of AMI in a particular subset of units. We'll need money there, and that money will need to be, there for years while we're establishing that program. There's a case model, a couple different styles that you can do. We've kind of discussed those things before. One in direct offsets, down payment offsets, first and last, security deposits, things that landlords are requiring. those are all things that we can do in existing inventory that is not affordable, that we can make affordable in town, and also what we can deploy in the ones that are being built now.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we give, before Eric starts talking, him bullet points that he can speak to verbally. He doesn't have to throw all that on this slide.
Yeah.
It's not going to fit anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've only got 5 minutes.
No, I
Yeah.
guess,
So
yeah, I would 100% agree. You can't have me talking up here.
No.
So yeah, I'm not gonna like read this sentence. I'll chop this thing out, but I'll move on and I'll just say like we have between Pine Street and Upton Street, 500 units that will be coming online in the next couple of years. A lot of those are affordable designated already. We have the opportunity to make even more of those affordable designated, and as many of the townspeople may have seen, there have been several developers in front of the select board, the housing trust recently for additional projects in the future. That's basically it. I mean, the point is to say, hey, there's a lot of activity, and that's why we're asking, for representation on CPC, because activity, the way that we can help affect change when there's activity is through funding and advocacy.
Anybody else have any more
Okay.
comments on this slide?
Yep. Sorry.
Okay, great.
Okay. This probably needs a little bit better fleshing out, but this is the why, right? Like we've set the stage. There's a housing crisis. The trust is not on CPC. CPC is its main funding mechanism. So, why do we need why are we asking the town for membership on CPC? I'm missing it here, but like the benefit to Grafton.
So, Eric, I would recommend that you do a slide on maybe a more graphical slide on opportunities that the trust has and why it needs funding.
Okay.
So I'd be careful about going too deep into things like AMI, but if you talk about it in more general terms, I think that would definitely help drive the message that the trust can't do a whole lot with limited funding, and there's just so much opportunity at this point, but it's going to require that kind of funding.
And Matt, are you talking about, like, when you say graphics, what would the data behind the graphics be?
I would just put some graphics up in terms of all of the different types of programs that affordable housing trusts engage in.
That's fine. I can get you that, Eric, if it's just like a bullet of different things that other communities have
I
done.
wouldn't even put bullets. I'd put graphics up on housing, mortgage assistance, rental assistance, lowering affordability, all of the various programs that you can do, and just put those in as sort of as a graphical representation of all of the different things that trust can do that require funding. I just think as people
Just like a pie chart. I don't have to put percentages, but it's like, rental assistance, mortgage assistance, this, that, the other thing.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, I just think it's going to be better than looking at bullets.
yeah, I know.
Right.
What would the graphic be though? I'm just not clear.
I don't have a specific thing in mind, I guess. But I'll send it to you. I just need a little chance to think. Data presentation is difficult, as we're all finding out here.
Yeah.
But I just think it would be, if you're going to put it up on the big screen and talk about all of the different things that housing trusts do, it would, instead of just putting bullets up, it might be better to put some type of graphic. And so let me think about it. But I think that's an important one to do, whether you do bullets or graphics. I think it's an important one to put up all the different things that require funding.
All right.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
again,
something-
I picked this up on Monday or Tuesday, and then I had to put it right down. So it is not pretty, obviously. It's just bullet points, me trying to get thoughts onto slides. So as I wrap this up tonight, I'll try to think of some ways to make it more visually appealing.
Okay.
Just so it's not all bullets.
I'll do some Googling and see if I can pull some material up for you too.
Yep. Okay.
There was some chipmunks in it.
So yeah, I get what you mean. So that slide that Matt's talking about is going to be like, what does Grafton get from its affordable housing trust? So maybe this sets the table for that. We're in a housing crisis. Affordable housing, based on our mission, does not have representation from an official board committee or trust membership currently on the CPC. And then we'll bounce into the reason you, Grafton, want that is these benefits here.
Okay, but they're going to say you're already getting that. Why do you need representation if we're going to give you the money anyway?
Yeah, so I'll leave it up to the group, but I was thinking of putting up a slide that explains the difference between the housing authority and the trust, because that kind of answers the question. Like, affordable housing is one of the categories that is meant to have representation. In 2002, it was thought that the way to do that at the time was through the housing authority representing affordable housing. The situation in Grafton is such that the housing authority cannot access CPA funds. So, and frankly, they serve a different population than what the Affordable Housing Trust serves. Housing authority is HUD public housing for low income, disabled, seniors, families, etc. And they're capped. They can't build anymore. The housing trust is in private partnership with developers or nonprofits that can build housing that is not restricted to only low income and those with disabilities. It is open to middle income families. And the housing authority, through no fault of its own, that is not their mission. That's not their population. Our population is broader, and we have the ability to build more units. So I don't know if we want a slide of that or.
No, I wouldn't. I'd leave it off, but it's an important talking point. And however you want to do this, when you get to this particular slide, I think this is where you want to spend a majority of your 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because this, again, we talked about this previously. We're making a change here in a small conservative town. So the impetus is going to be against change. We have to be able to articulate why this move is needed and why the status quo just won't do and why we have to do this now. The future funding part is the why we have to do this now, because we're blowing our wad here on GSX. And we're not going to have enough money to do anything legitimate moving forward. We're going to need representation because you need a vote. Talk is cheap. And the ability to have a vote for the funding source is legitimate power to get some of this stuff done. And you need representation on that board. And this is a basic fairness argument. And of course, again, I don't want to preview this argument for everybody who's going to be watching this. So I'm loath to say too much here. But this is a point that we do need to address.
I think programming is important as well as an overall mission of the trust. It's not just about building units, which actually I think is kind of detrimental to this argument, because my sense of a lot of corners of town is people don't want us building units, and that's works in direct opposition to fundamentally what we're trying to do and, help Massachusetts resolve its housing crisis, but here you are in Grafton. But take, for example, the rental assistance program. If we, had been better prepared for that particular situation, although we did, save people and kept them in their homes, and it was a good job, we certainly could have done that better. And that would be something that I think would be instrumental, to a position on CPC. The trust was elected to handle that type of situation because everybody felt at the time it was in our purview. They didn't reach out to the housing authority. They reached out to us. We were the ones on point there. I went to that meeting. We were put on point, and that was a funding source for us, and it worked out really well. But if we were there at every single meeting, making sure that all the other membership knew exactly how important that was and what the role of the trust is in that situation, and especially the autonomy that the trust brings to that situation for helping the, people stay in their homes during crisis situations. I think this would be a no-brainer at the time.
Yeah, I'm gonna, in terms of the more units thing, on that, I'm just gonna say it how it is, which is the more units being generated are generally going to happen regardless of whether we're involved. The question is, do you want all of those units at top market rate prices, which drives people out of town? Or do you want a certain portion of those to be designated as affordable so that residents can stay here, and certain populations that we'd like to be able to come to Grafton will actually be able to? So that's kind of my response to, the people that don't want any new development. Well, we're not generating the development. The only opportunity for us to do that is with 25 Worcester Street. But we don't get a piece of land every day, But
let's be careful. Let's be careful, though, because we don't want to turn this into an argument about whether affordable housing is good or bad. Affordable housing is here, and the CPA is responsible for funding it. As soon as we go down the rabbit hole of affordable housing is good or bad, you could get half the audience to say, well, I don't like this to begin with, so I'm saying no. The message is CPC's mission is in part to develop affordable housing and to fund it. And basic fairness says that if the trust is getting its funding from CPC and CPC doesn't have an actual representative for that prong of its mission, then it's only fair, right?
It's about taking advantage of opportunity too.
If someone gets up and says, well, this affordable housing stuff is bogus anyway, you don't even address it. It's not worth it. Don't go down that rabbit hole.
The good news here is, Eric, you're going to be given the floor for this substantial amount of time. So nobody will be addressing you. They may address it afterwards, and you can take the questions as they come. But you're going to be able to get through this whole thing without anybody interrupting you, hopefully.
Yep.
But other aspects, historic, open space, right, those type of things, they have membership there, For example, chapter land comes out, they're usually Johnny on the spot. When Lee Robinson sells a chunk of property, everybody's there just waiting to grab it. I assume that's going to happen as well. Land came out of chapter on one of the proposals that came across, and we were the last ones to the table. It seemed like everybody else was ready to be there on it. I think, in some regards, having membership on CPC kind of assists us in making sure that we're at the table when all this stuff is happening. Because we're with people from historic, we're with people from rec and open space, and everybody who's been contributing over the last decade and a half to CPC.
Okay.
And although we saved a lot of our 10%, it should be said that if you look at the accumulated, wealth that the town has generated to spend on CPA, you're only at about 12% of total spending. on what I would hope would be at least a quarter. And that is a direct representation of who's on CPC and what areas of town are actually, I guess, higher on the list, so to speak.
Yeah, but I don't, like I said, I prefer to keep this future looking.
Right.
Because as CPC likes to say, and it is accurate, they have never denied a project. And if we get into, there's only been 11% of the funds on affordable housing. Like, I don't know. I think that gets into blame game and stuff like that. And I don't want to. I personally don't want to present that type of presentation.
Okay. I would tend to agree. I'm guessing most people here are going to agree as well. Why don't you just get us through the rest of the slides and we'll make
Yeah, I mean, there's not, like I said, this is kind of where I tapped out. So, Matt, maybe this might kind of address what you're talking about. I was thinking of taking GSX Upton Street as an example. Like, this is a real example of what happens when the trust can get involved with a project, and basically just laying out, standardly, this is how GSX development would go. This is what the units would be priced at. There'd be 10% affordable because they have to. But with the trust getting involved, it goes up to, we were able to get it to go up to 25%. That means 18 additional units over what would have happened without our involvement. That's 18, families, seniors, whatever, who may be able to afford that housing. And then additionally, that we are helping protect the town through community choice by bumping that number up to 25% and getting all 123 of those units to count towards SHI. So that's, I wanted to highlight a real example. I'd like to try to figure out what, the projected rents would be for the affordable units, those 18 additional ones, versus if everything besides 10% was market rate. And showing that difference, it's probably hundreds of dollars per month for a family. I think I'm comfortable highlighting how affordable housing actually benefits the residents of the town. When people see it, I think it makes it more real. Like, these aren't like free apartments we're giving out. It's you're still going to have to probably spend over $1,000 a month on rent. But that's a lot better than $2,300 a month that ends with you, not being able to stay in Grafton.
The funny part is, 2 years ago, this slide would have been accurate as is.
Fair enough. I mean, it does happen to be campaign season, and I do see a lot of responses out there about, my kids are coming back from college and things like that, and they can't find affordability in the towns where they grew up in. This is instrumental, the Pine Street, the GSX project, Prentice Place. If you're looking at that, 70 to 80% of AMI plus utilities included, you're saving that individual, $400 or $500 a month in one of these units. And for a 2-bedroom, that's a substantial amount of money with the cost of living in Grafton, and it's not going down. So.
And that's the thing, like, even, officials or candidates who may be somewhat lukewarm, or they think they're lukewarm on affordable housing, they bring up the fact that their kids can't buy a house here, their kids can't rent here. They feel that, and I think just getting it up there, like, hey, this is the work we do. It is literally giving the opportunity for your children or your parents or your friends to stay here, and have. The concept of generational families in Grafton was around for a long time, but I think it's at risk. Like, I lived in Newton. All those families that have been in Newton for generations they ultimately have to move because the rent goes too high, or they have so much money sitting in their house, like they have to sell it because and move out west. And we don't want that to happen to Grafton. So I think that argument resonates even with people who are maybe a little lukewarm on the nebulous concept of affordable housing.
I think it's a good sales pitch for this.
I like it.
All right, did you have one other slide for us? Ooh, that's not a big one.
So I definitely like the trust feedback here. So, some concerns have been raised about this change. The CPC detailed some of their concerns that led to, their opposition to this. I don't know if you guys felt like I should try to address some of those. The main ones, if I'm remembering from the letter, were, their perceived value of an at-large seat. What else?
Eric, I really think you should cover them inside as best you can inside the other slides, and so it's not,
That slide on its
highlighting
own.
what could be some animosity and some past.
Well, the way that I'm thinking of it is just trying to address those concerns. We never actually were able to have a dialogue with CPC. I think we were supposed to when you went to present the annual report to them, but it never actually occurred. So, it's unfortunate, but
Well, I leave it to you, Eric, how you want to do it. You could do it with a slide, save it till the end, which is, I think it's a powerful way to make a closing, because you know that the very next thing that the audience is going to hear are what the concerns are. So to the extent that you can address those and inoculate our own argument, I think that's important. You don't want to leave that open. Or you could do it the way Bruce is suggesting and do it back with the why argument over in slide 6. But, you're the one doing this. So however it feels more natural to you to do that is the way to go. You're just going to want to think about it beforehand, because the last thing you want to do is inadvertently, you got 5 minutes, right? So don't give that argument during slide 6 and then come to slide 9 and be like, okay, now I'm repeating myself.
Yeah, and that's the other thing here. I will, once I kind of get the base content finalized on this, I'll do a dry run and time it. And, very well may be like, there's just no opportunity to have a slide for this or whatever. So, I don't think a lot of these slides are like requiring much more than 30 seconds to a minute. So, it's really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6, 7. So if it's like 45 seconds a slide, we're right around 5 minutes, and there's really nothing else that we have time for. The other stuff will just come up, if people have questions or, points get made during the debate portion, and those can just get answered organically instead of having, we can't do an info dump in this deck.
No, you're
Keep
right.
it straight into
Or
the
do you
point.
want to?
No.
All right. I'm happy with the general format of the content, and I'm also happy with the fact that you're willing to step up and do this. So I'm willing to give some discretion internally, with the focus being on, like you said, future, what we want to bring to the town through this change, and some of the exciting stuff we have coming up, and not dwelling on the past. That works for me. How does everybody else feel before we kind of give Eric the blessing to go ahead and finish this up?
Yeah,
Dan, please.
I definitely agree with not dwelling on the past. I think there's been a lot of that. And I don't think anybody at town meeting cares about any of that. I think it'll just kind of turn them off. So, definitely focusing on just, the present and forward be the best way to get support.
All right, Brittany, I haven't heard
And
from you.
again, apologies for not having this more fleshed out. It's just the circumstances could not have been worse. So apologies.
Well, you got like 3 days. You can pull this together.
I think I have to be done tomorrow morning.
You have to have the slides loaded for to tell them how much space you're going to need. We'll work that out with Blake in the morning.
Okay. Yeah, and obviously, I'll send out like a draft with more the actual content filled out for some of these slides, and maybe people can address if they don't feel comfortable with something or whatever, they can address that to Bruce. And, I can make a change or whatever.
Yeah, why don't you throw my cell phone number all over this baby? Okay. Need some people to give me a call. Brittany, did you have anything? I haven't heard from you yet.
No, I think that all sounds good. I just want to keep it as positive as possible, which you've all been talking about. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, Eric, how much more help do you need from us to get this flushed out tonight?
I don't know how to get this info necessarily, but if somebody could help me with some kind of projection of what the affordable rent for GSX would be versus Chris, maybe you can help with that. That would be great.
Yeah. So I can't assume what they'll do, but the 2022 numbers, what they have is typically it's called a fair market rent, and that's the maximum amount that the affordable units can be charged at. So you're correct that all of them, including the efficiencies, are over 1,000. Typically, developers will put it right at the maximum amount because they need to make their money back. So, but the efficiencies are 1,103. One bedroom is $1,162. Two bedroom, 1,491. Three bedroom, 1,843, and four bedrooms, $2,022. I can send those over to you as well. That's easier.
Okay. And then I have, GSX's pro forma, so I already know what they think they can charge for full market rent, and I'll just have a comparison.
Yeah, those are the affordable units. Sorry, the 1,103 for the efficiency.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Chris, if you can just double check that with me. And like I said, I have the pro forma, so I know what their market rent will be or what they will be offering the non-affordable units at, so I can do the comparison. Rental assistance, does anybody know, just off the top of their head, or if they could provide it to me, how much was dispersed or how many families or individuals were helped? I know it wasn't a ton, but every family that was helped, that's a huge moral win to me.
We had a summary that was sent to CPC on that, and I can forward that to you. That has the full amount and then how many checks were dispersed.
Okay.
The one thing that report was missing, Chris, is how many people actually applied. I think it just showed how many people actually went through the process. One of the big sticking points with that particular program was a lot of people had applied for other sources of grant. We didn't allow them to double dip, so to speak. So the state and federal programs were far more attractive than ours. Some people just fell into ours just because they didn't look any further. Or they had landlords that didn't cooperate, or, X, Y, and Z. There was a bunch of things there, but we had well over 20 applicants. And I think it was 8 people that we sent checks to. I know that's granular, but it's another piece to that. If you just put 8 up there, it wasn't really representative of what we did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like the availability of it was a much bigger thing. Just having that available, in case I think we started talking about it before the state and federal programs were really solidified. So it's kind of one of those things where you couldn't have known it would play out that way until it was already
part of our
in
point
progress.
here, Dan,
Ours was up.
If we were focused on it and we were part of that discussion with other people, we could have been there. It's one of our selling points of being on CPC. Chris, please.
So I just wanted to mention that that was up and running before the RAFT program came up, and we did run it even in tandem. And there were people that for whatever reason weren't eligible for RAFT that then could get this assistance. So people do fall through the cracks of those programs, and I think we had an additional net there, which so I don't want to I commend the board for what they did there, to the trust.
And then, yeah, Matt, you had already said, but just to reiterate, if you just give me an example of like how the graphics you're thinking. I just got out of the car for 5 hours, so my creative juices are not flowing right
Yeah,
now.
no worries.
But
I sent you over a graphic that
okay,
is along the lines of what I was thinking about. It's just distributing the bullets into more of a. If you're going to put it up there and say, "Here's all the things that trusts do," I think it's an easy thing to just attach some graphical information to it for people to look at while you talk through it.
So that was that. Don't think there was anything else.
At the end of the day, Eric, these are your slides, and you've got to be comfortable presenting them.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be too prescriptive. If that doesn't work for you, then just do you.
No, like I said, I'm kind of tapped out right now. So just get me an idea of how to make this look a little bit better, and I'll run with it.
Sure.
And moving forward through the weekend, Eric, if you want to dole out some assignments for if you have one slide that's irking you, send it to somebody. What only thing we just can't do is we can't meet in an organized group. We don't have enough time to post and do things like that. But as long as it fits the general format of what we're trying to do and what we coalesce around here tonight, you have some discretion to say, hey, put those graphics in, Matt, please, and then send them back to me. And then we'll work with Blake to make sure we know how we upload for our final format. Because this is all going to be part of one file. You should just be able to put it in and override the previous file. So as long as the amount of slides you have and things of that nature are the same, it should be okay.
Okay.
And I'll go meet with them tomorrow to make sure it's hashed out. So.
Just like another thing I just popped into my head. I was able to briefly talk with the moderator, Dawn, and she, confirmed the 5 minutes. Basically, she said, for the presentation, just have it be one person. But once it gets to, more debate or, people might have questions, she's like, anybody on the trust can answer at that point. So, I don't know. I can't think of I don't think we can do a ton of planning to try to anticipate questions, but I guess just everyone kind of be mindful, maybe do some reading up on some of the stuff that's gotten fuzzy on projects or whatever, so that we can answer questions. And then, my Don will obviously do a good job of this, but we don't want to be redundant. I get the urge to want to talk about the cool stuff we're doing, but if somebody answered a question, you just gotta, we want to try to keep it short, because again, this will be the last article of the night. So we don't need to be, having 3 people say the same thing on the trust. Like if somebody said it, then close the book and we're done. So
yeah, this could be 8:15 or it could be 10:45. I'm guessing it's going to be close to the 8:15 mark, but you never know.
Yeah.
Okay, is everybody comfortable with our approach and what we're doing? Okay. Well, Eric, I'm going to give you the discretion to move on with it. I'll coordinate with the town administrator's office in the morning to make sure we get the composite here. So if you could send this over to me when you're finished with it tonight.
Okay.
And then does anybody else have any comments or concerns before we move on to our next topic? Okay. And nobody wants to scramble to do handouts or anything like that. All right. So I'm going to be completely honest. The next thing I put on there was just to see how much of a rise I could get out of everybody in town. But it is a fundamental discussion that we should have as an advocacy group, and having a yearly election, especially to the office that directly appoints us. It's something that I wanted to bring up. I realize that it's very late in the game and I probably should have brought it up sooner. But with all the stuff that's been flying back and forth out there and the things that I'm picking up and seeing and the highlight that we're getting as far as a organization is concerned, and for me, people's, lack of familiarity with, what we do and what our role is in town. I wanted to bring this up and let, people discuss this, whether we move forward with it tonight or whether we put an instrument in place where we actually have a review process and we actually ask candidates to come in and meet with us. I read through the statute again today in preparation with my, my meeting with the coalition, and it reaffirms some things about what I think the state was trying to do and the Commonwealth was trying to do when they instituted this. And in reality, it changes and becomes amorphic because you have some communities that just stack the deck because they don't want to see anything really happen with regards to affordability or new development. And then some communities are, very challenged because they have a group of people that wants to go out there and do something, but there seems to be a roadblock at every step of the way. So, going through this process, I'm like, well, perhaps it's something that we really should take a look at. Our role here as a quasi municipality, which is basically what we are, should we field a better role in local politics? What say everybody? I'm going to round robin this so everybody gets a chance to talk. Eric, you're up there on the screen. Why don't you tell me your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think we should be endorsing select board specifically because they are the ones who appoint us. So what happens if we endorse candidates and those candidates win? Well, then, there could be accusations of favoritism. What happens if we endorse candidates and they lose? Well, the people who get on select board that we didn't endorse might not be so happy about the trust. So I'm big on advocacy. I think there's a lot of stuff that we could do. We've started discussing that in terms of community advocacy. And I know where you're coming from, Bruce. Like, it's frustrating to see select board candidates, dance around the affordability question. We kind of know what's really going on there. And I would say just let the voters or we, trust members can act as individuals and try to call out the window dressing support for affordable housing. But in terms of the trust itself, I don't think it's appropriate. And I do think that we are, although a trust, we are still considered town employees through the volunteer thing. So I just, I get where you're coming from, but it's a no for me, dog.
All right. Dan?
Yeah, I don't think it starts a good pattern for a committee, a town committee, to be endorsing in the town politics. I think it's the direction of influence is a little backwards there. That the elections kind of determine who gets appointed to these kinds of things, and I don't think there should really be kind of a backwards flow of influence from committees to who should get elected. I feel like this is one of the pros to having a separate sort of group outside of the trust, outside of official government, just a group of concerned citizens who support affordable housing, that they could do something like that. They're part of the voters. And, they could talk to candidates, they could endorse if they wanted to. But it's not really our place to be leading that kind of thing.
Ed?
Well, I think those are compelling arguments, but I'm a yes. Because look, we're not a committee. We're not a commission. We're a trust. And we don't spend enough time talking about this. And, you know, I don't want to get up on my soapbox or anything, but as a trustee, your duty is to the beneficiaries of the trust. You have an obligation to put their needs ahead of yours. And there is a housing crisis in Massachusetts, and it's not by accident. It's not as though everybody just forgot to build housing for 20 years. This is by design. Opposition to housing affordability, creation, whether it's market rate or affordable or not, is institutional. There is institutional opposition in the statewide CPA toward the creation of housing. There's institutional opposition in local governments and planning boards to the creation of affordable housing. We have to figure out how we, as some of the few advocates, relatively speaking, who exist and live in the state of Massachusetts, can best push the message forward. And I'm sorry, but it's in the year 2022, it's too late to dither around the edges of this and sort of dip our toes into it and say, well, you know, should we or should we not? Dude, we have an obligation. And there are people who are running for office who want to tell everybody, oh, you know, I'm for this. I just have other concerns, you know. And everybody says, oh, isn't that what a nuanced answer that is? She's thinking about other things. And we know the truth. We know what that answer is. And we know why it was said the way it was said. And we know why it was said, when it was said. And we know why it was said, to whom it was said. And we're going to be quiet about that and hope that individually our messages get out there. Look, I mean, I was not renewed from this position on July 1st of 2015 because I spent April through June of 2015 fighting for the very same money that we're about to get 28 units out of. That's how seriously you have to take this. You have to be willing to say, okay, if somebody has a problem with me because I did my job and we got something out of this and I'm non-renewed, I can look myself in the mirror and say that, fine, that's how that worked out. You know, I just think we've got an obligation to do it. Because no one else is going to, by the way.
Brittany?
To be honest, I'm not swaying one way or the other. Yeah, I'm not completely sure. At first I agree with Eric and Dan, and then Ed does have a good point, but I'm just trying to think of like what's the risk and what's the benefit here. And do we all agree on who we're
Well, that would be the other challenge. That's something that we would have to figure out next. I want to see the appetite for this.
I'm open to it.
All right, Matt?
So I think the way that I would approach it, I think it's really important to have the conversation and to help people who are voting understand where the candidate stands. I guess my approach to it would be to potentially issue some intelligent questions that people might ask the candidates, and also to invite the candidates in. We couldn't do it this year, but I think in the future, an approach to help tease out those attitudes in a more in-depth way. You know, we see it year after year. Everybody raises their hand and says, I support affordable housing, right? But when it comes down to policy and when it comes down to priorities and making actual decisions, often, you know, that statement falls really flat and it becomes very hollow. So, you know, that would be my approach to this, is to invite the candidates in for some interviews, and then issue some guidance in terms of if voters want to ask difficult questions of the candidates, which they should, that we should give them some guidance on how to tease out those attitudes.
So,
and if, you know, just to be totally candid, for, you know, tonight, if we do decide to move forward on this, I feel a little weird because I'm going to have to work with whoever gets elected, so I'll very likely abstain from a vote if we decide to move forward with that. So
That's fair.
So, I went through the statute a few times. Of course, I was getting ready for a conversation with the coalition, which I'll bring everybody up to speed on in a couple minutes. I don't think, from perspective of this race, I think we've I should have brought this up a couple months ago. Probably I should have brought it up like 6 months ago, but things are what they are. I agree with Dan in the fact that, coming up with a group that's a subset of us is something that would make sense, and get a group of supporters there, so we have a presence in things that we do. I know we can spend money on that and developing the the forum, I know, but I also know that we can't directly support financially any campaigns, or at least that's how it was described to me. But was also described to me is that doesn't mean we can't, as a group, coalesce around one particular candidate. I don't have all the material I would need to get that done, and come to find out, there is, no trusts really do this, and play a role. But there's nothing that says that no trust can't. And there is nothing wrong with pioneering this role. As Ed said, it's 2022, and him and I have both been through this thing where you come up with a great idea, and all of a sudden somebody throws a piece of paper that was written in pencil from a 1960 warrant article and said you can't do that there. And it seems to be par for the course with pretty much everything that we do. It's just like one obstacle that gets leaned up against another obstacle, against another obstacle. I guess what I'd like to do is I'd like to put it to a vote, and perhaps the caveat to this vote is we explore it. And if I can get some, participation in that and put something together. Does that seem reasonable to folks?
The elections in 2 weeks.
And I couldn't hear you.
So the elections in 2 weeks. What's your? Are you thinking about doing something for this year?
I don't think we can. And I don't think I would want to do it without unanimous support for it, because I'm not really sure what that means. But, I know from a perspective, we're going to have a meeting next week, and we get to see what type of, support we get from candidates who are going to be there, and they're obviously going to be there. I mean, we can certainly talk about it on the 12th. But
I mean, there's a ton of stuff that we could do. I wish, that we're having this conversation, we could have sent out a questionnaire to the candidates to fill out. Were you supportive of 25 Worcester Street as a concept? Are you supportive of GSX as a concept? Are you supportive of Article 39? There's a whole, what are your thoughts on the promotion of affordable housing going forward? There was actually a couple decent, or at least one decent question asked at the debate about that, and I was surprised. But there were a ton of different things that we can do, and probably this is worth more conversation, I think, going forward.
okay. Eric, please.
Yeah. While I am still not comfortable with the trust endorsing a candidate, like Ed said, there's a ton of stuff we can do. I think we can send questions to all the candidates tomorrow. There's still 2 weeks. That's plenty of time to respond. It doesn't have to be a 50-page RFP. Let's ask specific questions about real projects, because Ed was kind of hinting at this in his last statement. When it's real, like, you can't dance around it. Do you support the fact that we want to, potentially develop 25 Worcester Street? Did you support removing the deed restriction? Yes or no? It's a yes or no response. Tell us, we can give a open-ended, like, what does affordable housing mean to you? Do you support the trust's efforts at 1727 Upton Street? Do you support the trust getting a seat on the CPC? These are all very specific things that will make it very obvious to the trust, who's kind of in our corner or not.
Let's do that.
I'm sure there's other things we can do too, but yeah, I think that's an easy one.
Dan, would you do me a favor? This is a nice exercise to have anyways. Could you, after your question anyways, could we just let's stick with like 6 questions. Come up with 6 questions. We'll throw them in a format. We'll email them over to the candidates, and we'll ask them for a response by next Tuesday. Let's see what we get. I'm sure they'll come up with something. I mean, all of them are going to be standing out, waving at traffic for 6 hours on Saturday. I'm sure cut that like 45 minutes short and fill out this questionnaire. I'll make sure it's on the agenda so we read and tally some of the responses and kind of poke through it. Does that make sense to folks?
Yes, I would just say that we don't make it a yes or no. And if it's a yes or no, we say why they're answering yes or no. So there's a little bit more, less of a cop out, easy to cop out.
Understood. Dan, what was your question?
I was just going to say I like the idea of a questionnaire much better than actually making an endorsement. I feel like a questionnaire, we're providing a tool for candidates to express their own views on affordable housing. And then, it's not us trying to put our thumb on the scale and try to sway voters. We're trying to just give a tool that helps candidates to express their own views and help voters to understand them. So I think that makes a lot more sense for us to do as, I guess, a way to kind of to make affordable housing a more relevant topic in the conversations that are happening around the election, rather than us trying to direct the election one way or another.
Ooh, direct is such a strong word.
That's what an endorsement is. You're trying to tell people, vote for that one. That's
all right.
Anyway, with the 6 questions, though, I just want to clarify. Are you asking me to come up with the 6 questions, or are we going to talk about that right now?
I was hoping you were starting on that right now, but we're still gabbing about it. No, I just said 6. It should be a smaller number. We have a couple of people here in the audience that are also candidates as well. Does anybody mind if somebody raise their hand if they come up? I know it's my discretion, but this is a very personal conversation between us, so I don't want to interject non-trust members into it unless people want to hear it. All right, nobody said anything, so it's up to me. Andy, please come up to the mic.
Evening, gentlemen. Andy Jefferson, 31 Weston Street. I guess my question would be, what would then be the end goal of the questionnaire? Where would those questions go? Where would they be published? How does that benefit you beyond this? Because if they're read into the Affordable Housing Trust minutes, you're still reliant on people either watching your meeting to uptake that information or going back through the meeting minutes. So then, if you've asked the questions but nobody really has access to the answers or the information, are you relying on the candidates to then promote their own answers, or what's that next step? That's kind of what I'm envisioning, I guess.
Okay, thank you. All right, so there's another aspect of this is how do we get our word out? Because I don't know, Paul Scarlett's still watching us. Colleen Roy is still watching us. Those are 2 people that are gonna. We don't have a big following for people watching our shows. So in the next episode, next Thursday, how do we send it off? Do we send something to the common and say, here's some of the answers that we looked at?
I think this year that's a good idea.
Okay. Here's some of the things we're looking for. Here's some real answers to some questions that we feel are relevant, and we happen to be the experts on the matter. So, all right. 6 questions. That's kind of arbitrary. I wanted to keep it pretty short. Can we go around and maybe, Dan, you write down the questions, and then we'll pick the best ones out of them? Eric, you had a couple of good ones. Why don't you start?
Yeah. Let's see. do you support Article 37 passing? That's a pretty, and I don't think there's a problem with the yes, no. I think I want black and white answers that don't allow tap dancing. Not a tap dancing fan when it comes to affordable housing.
All right, that's Bravo one, of course. Ed, you had a couple as well.
Yeah, I'm one of the challenges is, the answer. If you leave the question open, to be candid, Anne-Marie Foley's answer that somebody asked her about affordable housing was a really great non-answer. It was specific enough to be like, yes, I support this. I have people in my family that might, I have kids too, but there are concerns, traffic, sewer, blah, blah, blah. The second question is always the best question. And the second question is the follow-up, which is, okay, but how do you value and weigh those considerations versus the very real need in the housing crisis? And so it's difficult even when sending out a questionnaire to get something genuine, which is why I do agree with Eric. If you can ask a yes or no question, that leaves a lot less room for that tap dancing. So, the questions that I would think of are kind of obvious ones, which are, did you support removal of the deed restriction on 25 Worcester Street? Do you support the development of senior housing at 25 Worcester Street? God, I could do this all night. Do you support the development of affordable housing for families with children in Grafton? How will you prioritize the development of affordable housing for families with children in Grafton? And Dan, I guess what we could do is you could write these down and pick like the best 6 that you think would be the most effective. But my only concern is to be careful of that question that allows someone to give you back a big fat meatball that doesn't mean a goddamn thing,
Brittany, got anything specific?
No, I just think the follow-up questions to Ed's point are important. I don't want them to tap dance around me, but I guess I can see through the BS sometimes, but I guess other people can't. So
I think I would ask a question along the lines of asking the candidates to prioritize the CPA spending, affordable housing, open space and rec, historical preservation, and articulate why it is that they would prioritize CPA spending that way. And again, with the idea that you can only have one list and one set of priorities. You have to have a number 1, a number 2, and a number 3, and to be able to articulate, why those are your priorities, I think would be a valuable question. I agree with a lot of what's been said already, so I'll leave it at that in terms of my questions.
I think that's a good one, a ranking, almost.
We want a Chapter 61A question as well. I mean, there's a lot of land that could come out of Chapter over the course of the next 10 years. And how do you prioritize preserving some of that for open space with housing needs?
It's a good question.
That one is the one that it absolutely does not lend itself to a yes or no answer. And that's one that is going to sort of give you a sense of how the candidate's thought process goes. Who's involved in the conversation with them? Do they understand the need for open space? Do they understand the need for housing? How do those two things balance together? Because part of is, Matt and Bruce, like part of the job is to be able to hold two opposing ideas in your head at the same time and understand that, yes, open space and recreation and historical preservation are all really, really important needs. And sometimes they conflict with this other really important need, which is housing. And there's really no right answer to some of this stuff. It's all about how a candidate's mind works,
All of that in terms of land use policy is also competing with commercial.
Right. Yep.
Right.
All right, Dan, so I know you've been typing away.
All right, so I got 5 out of that. Ed kind of listed a whole bunch of things in rapid fire, and I wasn't sure if they were all intended to be questions. But so I have: do you support town meeting Article 37 passing? Do you value and how do you value and weigh infrastructure considerations such as traffic, sewer, etc., versus the real need, the very real need of the housing crisis? How would you prioritize the creation of affordable housing for families with children in Grafton? How would you rank the 4 areas of CPA spending in terms of priority and why? And how do you prioritize preserving Chapter 61A land for open space versus housing needs?
I would add one more, Dan, a yes or no question. And this is, I think that the answer to this particular question is going to be really revealing when it comes to how the candidates answer the rest of the questions. And the question is this: is there a housing crisis in Massachusetts? If you answer no to that question, it's telling, so.
And what role should Grafton take in tackling that crisis? Because I have heard some commentary about, well, we're at 10%, we've done our part, we don't need to do any more because we've done our 10%, which is not really true. 10%.
Yeah, I've heard that. The state says we should have 10%, so that's what we should have, point of view, and that's definitely problematic.
Yeah, we got that in our last meeting, I think, right? We had somebody come up and say at 25 Worcester, if we're proposing any more than 8 units, it's, I forget what the actual term was, but it's reckless, I think was the term.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, to me, it's not even really 10% because you're getting 300 units and only 25% of them are affordable. So it's not even really 10% of the available units
That's a good point.
in the area.
Okay. So, moving on from this. So if we got like 6 questions, which Dan's is sorting out, I don't want to keep everybody here too late. Putting this information out. We could, of course, use our website, which is not very adequate. We could send something to the news outlets. They're pretty straightforward. They don't need a lot of advanced time. I can probably track down and make sure, or one of us can, what we would need to submit. Grafton Common, Grafton News, etc. If you could think of another one, you can send it to me. But most of those are just online flash type of things. So we can do that. We can, of course, use all our own personal information. We can also go to the individual groups that host the Facebook message groups. There's a little bit of outreach there, and it might be helpful in people's decision makings one way or the other. As long as everybody's okay with the message going out in all those venues, I don't see a problem with us getting this information out there. And then, of course, we'll have it on the 12th, and we'll discuss it a little bit and go through some of the answers, read off some of the stuff we like and things of that nature. And then we just won't actually endorse a candidate. Does that sound all right? Dan, what'd you have to say?
So I wonder if we even need them to report their answers back to us. If we, just encourage them to answer these questions and make the answers public. I think that if somebody wants to ignore this, they can ignore it, whether we ask them to turn it in or not. I think it's, I guess if they. So is your idea that they'll respond to us with answers and then we'll talk about it at our next meeting? Is that
should be the understanding, and we'll put that in our email to them, saying, "Hey, this is what we're looking for. This is our particular, interest as a trust. Independently, I'm sure we all have other things that we're considering when we decide who we want to, pull the lever for, so to speak. But from a trust perspective, we're not endorsing. This is a good way to engage the audience, and we can build on it too. This is something that we do now, then we can go, when in November we have, people running for office, on a state level, which is something that you need support from. It's something that we can play a role in, send something to Moraney and Moore, whoever is running in those particular things, and at least build and garnish a little bit more influence for ourselves. We have been talking quite a bit about making sure that we get this outreach going. Perhaps the candidates look to us every year for a submittal, and at least gets us some exposure to people that don't typically come to our meetings. Just it's not really a hot spot unless we're putting, a neighborhood, we're trying to build in somebody's neighborhood.
So my only concern with that is it sounds like we would be having a discussion kind of like about who to endorse and then just at the end not taking a vote. It sounds like it's basically the same thing, just without that last final decision at the end.
Right, so what you're saying is I was trying to find a loophole around what you were just arguing for me to go against.
Yeah, basically.
All right, well, that's something to consider. I didn't consider it. How do you guys want to review this material? Do you want to just post it, put it part in our packet, or do we want to discuss it a little bit?
I'm fine discussing.
I think it's appropriate to discuss. The quality of the discussion can more, be a little bit substantive, but also focused on, confirming that we got the type of answers that we expected, and that we're happy to sort of, distribute it.
I mean, this is very, very specific and focused on just stuff that we have some relevancy to. We're not asking questions about the budget. We're not overstepping our scope, so to speak. Some can make that claim that it's all part and parcel to one thing, but we're just looking at a particular focus, and all I see online is a bunch of tripe. So I can't figure out who I want to be, from this role, which I dedicated a lot of my time to. I need to find somebody that, would be good. Good for us, anyways. You speak up, you can put that on. Yeah, I did hold a sign for Andy Jefferson, Rich. I don't mind saying it. Anyway, that's not a loophole, by the way. All right, so we got 5 questions.
Can we do one more?
What's that?
Um,
I think we have 6. I'm looking at 6, at least.
I get this question. I think it's a good question, and you guys tell me if it's one too many. What does responsible new housing growth look like to you? Everybody uses that. I want it to be responsible. Everybody, there's no non-responsible growth candidate running. I'm the non-responsible growth guy. Put it anywhere. So what does that mean? That word, that phrase has to have some meaning.
All right, run back to 6 for us. Let's get them in the books, and then we'll do this by email, and then a quick introductory sentence in the email. Clerk's office can give us all of the point of contacts for the candidates.
Yeah, and you should just specify a number of words in the responses so that they're not too long.
And do we also want participation from planning board? I know they don't have a contested race, but they are relevant to some of our discussion. Our GSS project is actually going to go through the planning board process.
Oh, I thought you meant, do we want to go in on this with them? Yeah, sure. That's a good idea.
I mean, the questions are relevant regardless,
Yep.
Planning board's role in it is a little bit different, but okay. All right, how do you guys want me to proceed with this? Dan and
hold
I
on.
kind of wrap this up?
I just want to be clear. My list of 6 questions has 7 questions on it right now.
No, we're going to get to that point, Dan. I just want to
Okay,
make sure
cool.
we know what we're doing with this. So we can decide on the 6 questions, but drafting an email and stuff like that, we don't have to do here. It's almost 10 o'clock and Eric's half asleep anyways. So, all right, Dan, run through the 6 questions, 7 questions. You guys
All right,
pick one to toss. Or if we want to do 7 questions, I don't really care.
Do you support town meeting Article 37 passing? How do you value and weigh infrastructure considerations such as traffic, sewer, etc., versus the very real need of the housing crisis? How would you prioritize the creation of affordable housing for families with children in Grafton? How would you rank the 4 areas of CPA spending in terms of priority and why? How do you prioritize preserving Chapter 61A land for open space versus housing needs? Is there a housing crisis in Massachusetts? If so, what role should Grafton take in tackling that crisis? And what does responsible new housing growth look like to you?
Like all those, I'm just going to point out that by the time they answer them, the Article 37
Yeah, I was
question
gonna
will be.
say that too.
We can scrub that
Yeah.
one. The town will have already decided on it's not going to be relevant anymore.
Good point.
We'll put,
Did you support? No, just kidding.
So, all right, let's clip out the first one and then we'll leave the last 6. How about that? All right. Can somebody give me a motion?
I move we authorize the issuance of the 6 questions as discussed.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor by roll call. Dan?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Brittany?
Aye.
Aye.
Matt? Aye. Bruce? Aye. Okay, following up on that, Dan, you want to help me with this? Get this out tomorrow?
Sure.
Okay, so I just need a designation for Dan and I to draft an email, collect the candidate information, and send it to all planning board and select board candidates.
You need a motion to that effect?
I do.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor in reverse order. Bruce, aye. Matt?
Aye.
Brittany?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Okay, we're about to wrap it up here, and we won't have a chance to get into an official meeting until we actually get there. So this is the last opportunity to for comment on the presentation for Eric as he finishes his draft and moves on. If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion we adjourn.
Okay, wait here a second.
Second.
All right, completely random order. Eric,
Aye.
Brittany,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Bruce is an aye.
Aye.
Dan,
Aye.
you last, Matt.
Aye.
All right, we're out.